Take a deep breath. Breathe slowly. Center yourself so your aim is steady. Then let fly an arrow. Mifune calmly instructed Michael. All right. The young man steadied his aim on the stag, and the arrow cut through the air and buried into its heart. The beast let out a terrible cry as it slumped to the ground, dead. Good. More fresh meat for the pot. Michael slung the antlered beast over his shoulder, and the pan began walking back to the camp near the river. It was dawn, the morning star rising in the east. The mist covered the old valley. The forest road was twisting and winding. Nevertheless, they walked the path. Mifune studied Michael. What made you stay? I had nowhere to go, Michael answered. Why's that? Because my dad told me if I came back, then he'll be helping me for the rest of my life. Michael shook his head. Mifune smiled wistfully. You remind me of myself at your age. I had me a woman, a little girl too. But I threw that away a long time ago. Why? Sounds like you had a good thing going, Toshiro. Mifune sighed heavily. A man's mind is like this road. It's spiraling, winding, and plenty of folks wind up getting lost. I made my choice, and this road is nearing its end. That doesn't answer the question, Toshiro. Mifune didn't say anything else. He continued walking, leaving Michael to his thoughts. Whatever he's feeling, it must be shame, or maybe it's disappointment. He's always restless, melancholic look in his eyes. Eyes stuck on the past, or towards the future. Toshiro? Toshiro! Mifune, hold on a moment. Please? What is it, boy? We're not going anywhere until you answer me. Mifune warily studied Michael. I'm a killer of men. Do you think such a creature deserves something so sweet and dear, like family? No, we don't. I don't. People can change, Mifune. You sound like my wife, kid, but it ain't the truth. People can change, but we're the sum of our nature, Michael. He said. I was put on God's green earth to fight and to die. And what about your wife and little girl? When you die, who's going to take care of them? They'll be taken care of. Don't worry about it. The duo walked in contemplative silence, and by the time they returned to camp, the heavens were clear of clouds, and the dawn star shined brilliantly with its radiance. The men were at work, preparing for a day of hunting and fishing. Mifune and Michael strung up the stag, with Mifune handing the young man a bowie knife. He folded his arms as he watched Michael hold the large blade to the beast's belly. Michael paused. His hands were trembling. It's just meat and bone, Michael, Mifune said softly. Michael pushed away any doubt or hesitation he had as he proceeded to slice the belly of the beast open. Its blood and guts poured into the bucket beneath. With coolness of mind, he skillfully removed the skin of the animal. Only meat and bone, Michael told himself quietly. Mifune and Michael felt the earth rumbling, and they both looked to one another. A column of men-at-arms led by a knight in armor of crimson and gold with an obsidian cloak, an envoy of House Morningstar. He rode to the main pavilion of the Soldier King and the warrior's sons. Charles Stewart. Charles was a man in his 30s. His long brown hair was swept back, and he started to gray at his temple. But he was strong and thick as iron. He emerged from his tent only with his breeches and his sword sheathed in its scabbard. His cool, steely gray eyes met the knight's blue ones. "You're as mean as ever?" asked the Crimson Knight. "Yes," replied Charles, "but I don't have much opportunity as before." Charles gestured for the Crimson Knight to come inside his pavilion. The Knights' men-at-arms stood sentry at the entrance, and the Crimson Knight pulled a chair to the Soldier King's round rosewood table. Charles turned his back to the knight as he poured red wine into 2 cups. The Soldier King's pavilion was filled with trophies of past glories and accomplishments. He had racks of swords, spears, and shields. What stood out most was his armor. The pauldron had the heads of silver eagles, and the breastplate at its center was a falling star enameled with colors of whites and blues. Charles placed the cup next to the envoy, and he seated himself opposite the knight. Charles leaned back and kicked his legs on the table. He was swirling the wine in his cup, eyeing the Crimson Knight of the Morning Star like a hawk. "What's the old man want from me, Marcus?" Charles asked coolly. The Crimson Knight clears his throat. "He needs you and your men to secure Fort George up the river north." Charles scoffed. "It's an ancient old fast. Every one of their mothers had their fingers up in that old whore." "Be that as it may, Charles, these commands come from the old man himself. Your warrior son swore an oath, remember? The old man personally offered you knighthood for your stewardship. If you refuse him..." The Soldier King raised his hand. "Then I'll sell my services to the highest bidder. I know how this game works, Marcus." Marcus leans forward, his forearm on the table, his fists clenched. Charles smirked while still swirling the wine in his glass chalice. "I'll send Ezekiel and his raiding unit to scout. In the meantime, we have much to discuss." "Indeed." The Crimson Knight took a heavy swig of his red wine. "The old man's war against St. Michael's is not going as well as expected. Sacrifices must be made, Charles." The Soldier King frowned. "And those sacrifices include sending my men marching to their deaths at Fort George." "You'll do as you're told, Charles." The Soldier King studied the knight. He stood from his seat and walked to his many trophies, reaching for a pristine iron rod. Grasping it in his hand, he holds it like an instrument of ceremony. It's an elementary lesson of chess. How the player who has more squares tends to dominate, while the opponent is constrained with less than favorable options. That is the nature of the game. As in war and politics, the outcome is predicated on this binary: the winner and the loser. I won't be subjected to the follies and whims of the old man any longer. The Soldier King broke the rod of iron over Marcus's temple, leaving his skull shattered in pieces like a potter's vessel, and he stood stone-faced as the Crimson Knight stained the ground with his blood. By nightfall, Charles summoned the raider captain Ezekiel to his pavilion. He stood sentry as he waited for his commands from the Soldier King. "Gather 100 your best men. You'll lead an expedition to Fort George." Ezekiel blinked twice, clearing his throat. "We've routed out the degenerates living there. Holding it offers no tactical advantage, sir." Charles sat at the edge of his rosewood round table, fiddling with his bowie. "These commands are straight from the old man himself." He laid his bowie on the table and leaned forward. "I know it's a frivolous endeavor, Ezekiel, but do this, and we shall be rewarded." "Rewarded?" "The ancestral castle of House Morningstar." "Why?" Ezekiel asked as the dead and broken body of the Crimson Knight slumped over from the Soldier King's trophies. "Oh, you're making the move now." "Yes," said the Soldier King. "Tell Marcus's bodyguards that their knight is a welcome guest at our camp and won't be needed. Inform them on the morrow your raiders will be heading out to Fort George."